The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first or inaugural event of the subscription sessions. It's a new Recurly hosted webinar series that we're doing where we tackle a new topic each month. We're going to give everybody just another minute or so to join, and then we're going to get started. So hold tight and be ready. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to How to Retain Subscribers During Times of Uncertainty. First up, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session and we will be sending out the recording to everyone after the webinar, along with the presentation deck and then any materials that go along with the topic that we think would be helpful. We have a couple of reports and things that we'll be talking about that we'll share after. We will be taking questions at the end, but to make sure that we get to your questions in a timely fashion, there's in the right-hand side, you should have a little drop-down arrow that says questions. Please type your questions as we go into that little box so that we can address those, like I said, when we get to the question portion. And let's just kind of roll into some content. Oh, I skipped ahead too fast. So before we get into the content, we need to talk about who is going to be presenting. So myself, and I believe I'm the only one without a camera on, so I apologize. I couldn't get that to work. I'm the Director of Demand Generation here at Recurly. And then we have 3 of our seasoned veterans who are going to share a ton of knowledge on a bunch of different topics for you. We have Patrick Unold, who's our SVP of Customer. He leads our customer team. We have his right hand, our VP of Customer Success, Mary. And then we have Lucian Hart, who's one of our rockstar senior CSMs here. So, hi, Lucian. We're going to be covering a few different topics today. First and foremost, we want to kind of set the stage, the current state of churn. We'll share a few insights that we think are going to be really pertinent to the conversation. Talk about some of the impacts of COVID-19 across some of the industries, things that we've been seeing, the reasons you need flexible options, and then what those options are. And then we'll cover at the end a recap and some key takeaways so we make sure that we hit the high notes at the end for you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Patrick to get started.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. So, and thanks, Alicia. So as Alicia stated, what we're really going to start with here is creating a baseline and understanding the state of churn and some of the impacts that we're seeing today before we move into some of the mitigation strategies. So churn, as everyone who is in a subscription business knows, is a fact of life. And slight fluctuations in your churn and finding ways to mitigate churn can have a significant impact on your bottom line, and it's definitely worth the effort. When we factor into that some of the effects of COVID-19 and the global pandemic, we can see that it's even more important today to take a look at these options and see how to apply them to your business. So when Recurly thinks about churn, we want to make sure that our thoughts and our recommendations are data-driven. When we looked at the state of churn across all of Recurly customers in 2019, that's over 2,000 customers, we saw an average churn of about 5.6%. Now these are account churns or logo churn, not revenue churn. And when we break that down between B2B versus B2C, we see that B2C has an even higher churn rate than B2B. And that's understandable, as B2B typically has a longer buying process. There tends to be more consideration. The lock-ins tend to be a little more stringent. But nevertheless, these churn numbers are significant to the bottom line. Now, recurrently, when we double click on churn, we think of churn in two key buckets. We think of churn in voluntary and involuntary churn. Now, voluntary churn is, as it sounds, is when a subscriber decides, typically based on cost or cash flow or value perception of the value they're getting from that subscription, to make an active, conscious decision to churn. Involuntary churn is when an account is canceled as a result of, say, a failed credit card or a failed payment, or something in the payment process that cancels the subscription. So involuntary churn is something that can be mitigated probably best by working with a subscription platform such as Recurly that have tools that can be leveraged to rescue those involuntary churns before they happen. That might be through an account updater capability or some revenue recovery or a Dunning process for reaching out and asking customers to update their billing methods. And platforms that can automate that can have a significant impact on reducing that involuntary churn in an automated, very flexible, easy way to manage. But today we're going to focus on voluntary churn. When we look at voluntary churn, we think it's important to understand the scope of the problem and ways that we can mitigate that voluntary churn by creating flexibility in your subscription and in your account management process for your end subscribers. So we looked again, we're very data-driven at Recurly. We looked at a study that we did last year, late last year with payments.com. And we found that of those surveyed, over 27 million of them were looking to cancel at least one service soon. And of those surveyed, over 14 million of them would reconsider that cancellation if there were options, flexibility that could help them manage their subscription in a different way. So over half were open to considering remaining with the service if they had some different billing options. When we applied that that factor to sort of common industry, it's something that we're all using today, streaming media, as we're all trapped in our homes and looking for ways to amuse ourselves in our off hours. But if we apply that to streaming media, we can see a significant amount of savings of revenue that would otherwise go out the door by providing flexible subscription management options. So as we mentioned, churn is a constant. It's part and parcel of being in a recurring subscription business, but even more so today with COVID, as we've seen there's changes in the workforce, people are having their finances impacted, things are changing very rapidly, and as a result, consumer habits are changing as well, consumer and business habits. So it's important that to prepare, to make sure that your business is prepared to mitigate that, the impact of that churn, and to be flexible. It's important to have strategies in place that can provide you with the tools you need to retain those customers and keep that revenue that's in the door that you already have. And so we're going to talk about a few of these strategies, and let's jump in and run through those three options right now.
Sure, can't hear you, Mary.
Unmute. There we go.
Okay.
Hi. So let's talk about a few strategies. We're going to start with talking about free trials. Next slide, please. This is going to sound like common sense, but you'd be amazed once you apply it, the business value you get out of it. So essentially, longer free trials can reduce your cancellation rate. So you're in a short trial, extend the trial longer, and your customer is more likely to stay. In our own data, as we looked through this, we found that over 23% of customers said that if we gave them a little bit longer of a trial, they would stay. So again, this is very recent data, looking at what's been happening since COVID-19, so since about mid-March. When you look at certain industries and how they benefit from free trials, streaming media, and this would be people like HBO, CBS, Sling, Showtime. That's what we mean by streaming media. Streaming media is far and away the industry winner when it comes to seeing an increase in free trials. They're already seeing over 36% increase in free trials. The other thing that's interesting as far as verticals, so we're in a unique position in that we do see a lot of different verticals. Some of them are benefiting during COVID and some of them are not. Here with these free trials, things like the education sector. So think of all the people that are now home, all the children, all the college students, as well as adults that feel like they have some spare time and are wondering if they should pick up more skills. So people that are in the education space are, again, seeing daily averages of free trials that are doubling since the middle of March. And this is a trend that Recurly is keeping a very close eye on. So some tips around subscriber acquisition. Obviously, we started this conversation around this webinar around retaining your existing customers. But of course, every business is focused not just on retaining, but continuing to acquire. The thing I think is so interesting about free trials is you've got them in the door. How do you keep them in the door? How do you get them to the point of conversion? They're all right now at high risk, as Patrick had mentioned earlier. They're at risk of churning out subscriptions. They're interested in churning out at least one subscription that they have right now. I know as a personal consumer, I am as well. When people make me that offer though of an extended free trial, it puts that decision off and it gives your end customer the opportunity to experience your value in that extended free trial offer. In terms of, again, keeping those customers, it's about win-back strategies. This is one of Lucian's favorite topics. When it comes to coupons, we're applying credits to those existing customers just to let them know we're here for you and we want to give you the opportunity to continue to experience the value of our offer. When I think about optimizing for this is something near and dear to Recurly's heart as well. So obviously we run our own business and we look at our own data constantly to say, how can we optimize? How can we track what offers are doing the best? What meta tags can we be putting on our own data so we can see what win-back campaigns are working, what credit strategies are working, what length of extended trial is working. This is all going to vary business to business, but you really have to have your eye on each piece of the free trial experience. And go ahead.
I was going to say that's a great point, Mary, because there's really no one and done. There's really no single length of trial that applies across all businesses. Every business is going to have their own optimal amount, and it's important to test, iterate, do your A/B test, take it to market either by segmentation, and use tools to help you understand what's the optimum free trial for your business, keeping in line that you may have a cost of goods sold that you're going to need to manage to, so that you're not extending your free trial beyond your cost recovery ability.
Totally. I'm thinking now with this pandemic, there's a talk track going around that life has slowed down. The flowers are growing back, the birds are louder, life is slowing down. To me as a business person, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like the business pace has actually picked up, and people are fighting for their customers, fighting to retain them, fighting to make sure they don't churn, and looking at their own A/B testing, their own metrics, even more closely now than ever before. And when I think about these efforts, the details around premiums and extending the trial, you have to be testing often, you have to be measuring often.
Yeah, I had a friend I was talking to yesterday who was saying, you know, I've got a lot of priorities that I'm dealing with in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Having this extension of my free trial or my service allows me to kind of put that on a shelf and not think about it. It gives me the time to address my current priorities. And I think customers appreciate that option so that they can move that priority into the future and deal with what they have to deal with now.
Yeah. Next slide. One of my favorites. So you'll see behind me my Peloton. I am a Peloton user. Peloton is a great example of an innovative company that has extended their free trial. So I'm on it every other day and I'm watching their offers change. They are iterating often. They are playing with their free trial length. They are playing with their offerings throughout this pandemic. And I think with the free trial, they've captured a lot more market share. And what we see as consumers, what I see as a consumer is a constant innovation of the offers. Just today, they reopened live classes, but they're live from instructors' rooms. So iterating their business model, not just in terms of the free trial extension, but in terms of things like, wow, my entire business was built around classes inside a studio with lots of people, to the next step, which was now I'm going to give the classes with nobody in the room. And finally, to the new step, which launched today around, now I'm not even going to give the classes in the studio. I'm going to give them from these individual instructors' rooms, continuing to deliver value, innovating on the value. It's fantastic.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mary. You know, as Mary was discussing the free trial, or whether you're going to offer your customers a coupon, that's a great option for those customers who are coming in the door, you know, really focusing in this time on your acquisition strategy. But also I want to turn and spend a little time talking about what are our merchants doing right now for those existing customers to retain those customers that we currently have and to really stabilize the base, right? So one of the most powerful options you can give your customers is the ability to pause that subscription, right? As we all know, there's lots of reasons to do this, right? And this is your bottom line, right? This is the ability to decrease or really mitigate churn and protect your revenue. So the reasons for pause and the other strategy I want to talk about are obvious, but I want to kind of get into some of the details. Next slide. So when it comes to the trends that we're seeing in this market right now, we're doing some, you know, since March 16th, there's been 126% increase in the total number of merchants that are using the pause feature. So almost half of merchants right now who had subscriptions paused a month ago have seen an increase in the number of paused subscriptions since that time. And obviously those merchants that we see who have some sort of physical component to their business, like they have, you know, like movie theaters, or they have a physical park, you know, those customers are looking at, how do we really pause the entire base and do a mass pause? So this really clarifies the need to have a strategy around pause. As you can see on this slide, we've been tracking how our merchants and their customers are behaving during this time. And the initial data from our merchants shows that 1/3 of pause subscriptions are reactivated. So that's about 33% of customers who were going to cancel are remaining customers due to the option they had to pause. So that's really huge, right? And you know, given that we're still in the midst of COVID-19 and lots of our merchants still have a bunch of their customers in a pause state, you know, I'm guessing that in the next few weeks and months, we'll see this number increase, meaning the ability to pause will offer greater value as the impact of COVID-19 continues. So it's a really, really big thing to be able to offer this to your customer base. So, all right, how does this actually work? How does the pause actually show itself? There's actually 3 basic ways that I'm talking to my merchants and how I see them doing this. Obviously, the first thing is self-service. You need to adopt your cancellation flow, how you interrupt customers that are thinking about exiting. Giving them the option to pause is a really powerful option, right? Secondly, you know, you can do this in the Recurly UI. So merchants of Recurly, if they have your frontline customer support teams or your CSM teams who are interacting directly with those customers, right? Giving them the ability to go into the app, they're on the phone with that customer and that customer wants to cancel and they say, hey, how about a pause? And they can do that on the fly through our UI, right? And then the third way that we're doing this is obviously you can do this programmatically through the API. So customers who want to do this in bulk, offer a mass campaign, they can take broad strokes with their business and really have a strong effect on that bottom line. So these are 3 different ways. There's lots of flexibility, as Mary and Patrick were both alluding to. How and when to do this is based on your particular needs and your customer profile. So you can think about all these different ways to interrupt their intention to cancel and keep them as a customer.
I
All right,
think
next.
not
Okay.
just in terms of interrupting their intention to cancel, but when I look at the option to do it via API, and I look at some of our largest customers that have a mix of end customers. So they've got their enterprise customers and they've got their self-service customers, right?
Right.
So the ability
That's
to be
great.
strategic and make a decision as a company, right? To say, wow, so my enterprise, I think they're in a good place, but my self-service tier, I'd like to proactively make a move and make an offer. And therefore, programmatically, I'm going to take X millions of customers and make the offer and make the pause more present.
That's right, and it's also another factor is going to be the type of business that you run. So businesses, as we're seeing, as everyone is seeing, businesses that are dependent upon foot traffic are pretty significantly impacted by COVID-19 across the board. Whereas businesses that are more digital or perhaps provide a means of supporting folks while they're in their shelter in place or social distancing are perhaps less impacted. And we saw, as Lucian indicated as an example, one of our merchants, Recurly powers a wide variety of merchants, but one of our merchants provides a subscription service for a theater chain. And of course, with COVID, the theaters are closed. They simply cannot provide any value based on the subscriptions. And because it was something that impacted their entire user base, they used the API and went through and proactively put all those subscriptions in pause mode, used it as an ability to reach out to those customers as well, and let them know and try to generate some goodwill and to retain those customers that they had already spent so much money to bring in the door. And it's been very successful for them so far. They've not seen a significant increase in cancellations, and they will be able to unpause those subscriptions once the shelter in place and social distancing backs off, and folks are able to get out and go hit movie theaters again.
That's right.
I think what they're doing as well, Patrick, I love that example. Whether as an end customer of them, I love that they're continuing to give value even though they've paused the subscription. I find that piece to be genius. I am getting emails regularly about content that they know I'm going to be interested in when I can get out. I'm getting insider views behind the scenes of these movies, and it's been really interesting to see their innovation.
Yeah, and speak of genius, let's go to the next slide. I really love this next example. So this is an example of one of our customers who's offering pause in their cancellation flow. And one of the things that they're offering is, hey, tell us why you're pausing, right? And you can see the first option on this list says, I'm practicing social distancing, right? So I love this example because these topics are, at times kind of heavy, and these are big business decisions, but knowing your customer sensibilities, knowing that you can add a little humor or a little color, if your business is around dogs and puppies, adding something really cute that has to do with puppies. I really love this because it doesn't have to be heavy. And it really speaks to them knowing their user base and how they might really attract that person to take that pause, right? So you can get really creative, you can mix and match, but it doesn't have to be dire. It can be fun, it can be really tailored to your audience, as Mary was saying with the Peloton. Know your customer and really take that and offer a pause in a way that is appetizing to them. Right? It's really wonderful. So pause is one thing that we've seen, but there's also this other option that a lot of customers are using, which is postpone. So let's go to the next slide. So very simply put, the flexibility to move dates around is one option that also goes along with the pause. So I'll give you an example of something I heard last week. Customer calls and says, hey, I bought a warehouse of toilet paper, so I don't have a lot of cash this week, and actually I don't need to pause or suspend my subscription. I just don't want to pay this week. Could you move my bill date to the first of the month? Because my COVID check is coming soon. I'm going to get paid, and it'd be really helpful if I could pay at that time, just not this week, right? So having the ability to really not only pause the subscription, but to shift around the bill date and other factors in the subscription, make it so that you can create a model for your customer that gives them the best ability to pay and pay on time and remain loyal to you. Let's go to the next slide. So this is very easy. Again, you can do this as a self-service option. You can do this in the Recurly API for your, your big enterprise customers. You can do this for them programmatically. Lots of flexibility here. So, carrying forward those ideas of trials and pause and postpone, lots of different options that you can use to really get effective with retaining your customers. All right, so let's actually go to the next slide because I see that we're running short on time. I'd love to give some time for questions. So let's wrap it up here with some takeaways, Patrick.
Sure. So as you've seen today, with churn being a constant for any subscription business, but there's also what we like to call exogenous impacts. Today we're dealing with COVID-19, and these will continue to be factors in any business. So it's important that you maintain a certain amount of flexibility and adaptability to retain the customers that you have today, because we all know it's easier and cheaper to retain customers than it is to go out and get new customers. So mitigating that churn helps retain the revenue, and looking at strategies such as extending free trials, postponing or pausing can have a significant impact on your ability to mitigate that churn risk, and to keep that revenue in the door. So we hope that this was informative for you today. We hope that these strategies resonated with you, and that that you have some nuggets of information that you've taken away that are valuable for you. We're happy to answer questions, and of course, we're always happy to answer questions offline as well.
Okay, and with that, thank you very much, Patrick, Mary, and Lucian. I do want to go ahead and jump into some questions. The first question that was asked is, if you offer both monthly and annual plans, what normalized churn calculation do you use?
That's a fun one. Churn is a hotly debated topic amongst all of our merchants and our own internal stakeholders. Depending on the nature of your business, you're going to find churn differently as well as winbacks. So for example, there are some companies where if a customer leaves but comes back within X number of days, they calculate that as not churn. So I'm sorry to say it's a challenging question for me to answer, given that churn is so different with every merchant.
Let me add a little bit additional, because it looks like we have an addendum to the question that says, i.e. based on term, annualized, or percent up for renewal, if that adds any more context or anything for you.
So when I look at churn, across the Recurly business, because Recurly does have month-to-month customers as well as customers that are on annual plans as well. I tend to look at churn from a trending perspective on a month-to-month basis, and I'm going to look at month-over-month churn, which would capture that window of our monthly customers. And that'll give me a leading indicator of how I'm trending for the year. But regardless of their term type, I actually look at churn on an annualized basis as well, because if you take the leaky bucket metaphor, yes, you've got water coming out, but you're also putting water at the top, right? So I look at both, but I combine an absolute number comprised of both our month-to-month customers and our annual customers into an annualized number, and that's typically how I measure the health of the business in a rear-looking, in a historical-looking manner. Forward-looking, I look on a month-to-month basis. Is that helpful? Did that answer the question?
We'll see if he types in yes, but there is another question. What are the major industry changes you've seen as a result of COVID-19 for churn, growth decline, and services?
I'm happy to take that. So some of the things we've talked about today, some of the sort of high-level items that you might imagine. We talked about foot traffic. Foot traffic businesses are severely impacted. We talked about movie theaters, theme parks, amusement parks, businesses that are dependent upon somebody coming in the door, going through a gate, are extremely significantly impacted from a subscription perspective in particular. We mentioned streaming media and education as two industries that are also that are on the opposite side, that are seeing growth in free trials, but also steady growth in subscription. And I think we all understand how that goes. Surprisingly enough, what we didn't talk about, and was a bit of a surprise to us as we looked at the information, was that box of the month clubs or companies that ship goods that we would consider in the discretionary spend category are not being significantly hit. In fact, we're seeing sort of business as usual for the vast majority of our merchants that are in that category. Now, we have some outliers. We have some merchants that are very, very discretionary spend, but we've got some other merchants that provide monthly boxes for fashion or for pets and so forth, that are seeing steady growth in line with what we've seen year over year, and also what we've seen, where we're not seeing a decline.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great point, Patrick. I was thinking about the reality of so many people sheltering in place, and therefore being in front of their screens a lot more, and therefore doing a lot more online retail therapy. That combined with a large increase in people that are fostering kittens and dogs, or are spending even more time with their beloved dogs, and thus driving the sales for things like Kitty Poo Club or Bark Box, or a number of those targeted box of the months.
Yep, exactly. And other digital media services are surprisingly, and in some cases not so surprisingly, positively impacted. So media and entertainment publishing. People are obviously very focused on the news, and they're very focused on getting access to that information from their source of choice. And so we're seeing a significant spike in subscriptions, free trials for news and media outlet. For other digital service content, even in the B2B space, while we are seeing some B2B business taking a slight hit, across the board, the vast majority of the SaaS businesses that we power are providing services that enable remote teams to work together. And these services are, of course, even in higher demand today. So while we hear across the general news of the economy of the significant impact, and I don't want to downplay the significant impact to our economy, what we're seeing in key subscription-based businesses that have grown up and are focused on a recurring revenue model, particularly digital services and services that don't require foot traffic, we have not yet seen significant impacts to those. We've seen upticks in some, and even our leading indicators. So, we don't just look at active subscriptions. We look at free trial trends. We look at cancellation trends. We're looking at a variety of leading indicators that would suggest that there's not an impending cliff for these businesses that we're seeing in this fashion. But of course, we continue to monitor it. And as we all know, in these times, every day is a new day, and that's why we're staying flexible, we're staying nimble, and we're continuing to keep track of the data that we have at hand.
Okay, I think that those are all great answers, and I think that might be the end of our questions. I do want to just throw out to the audience that I just typed a note in the chat. So we're looking at how we can bring really valuable content to you during this time to help you do more of what we've been talking about in this webinar, to both retain subscribers and acquire subscribers. we have an opportunity to deep dive into one of these topics, but we want to know what you think is most important. So out of the three, if there's one that you want to hear more about, or if there's an alternate topic that you'd love to hear more about, please type that into the chat box, and then we'll follow up with content around that. And then I also want to call out that we have our next webinar happening on May 21st, and that's going to feature Robbie Kelman Baxter. We're going to be talking about tactical strategies. She actually does a lot of consulting and strategy consulting specifically for a lot of companies within the subscription industry. So she's going to be joining us to talk to different points, regardless of where you're at in your journey, either just launching, optimizing, or expanding. So with that, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll give you a few more seconds to type anything into the chat, and we'll talk to you next time. All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.